Hi guys, Josh here with Northern Frogger, and in today's video I want to talk about water, or more specifically reverse osmosis water. This is my reverse osmosis unit right here. Now I know this isn't the most exciting topic in the world, but I think it is an important one, since anyone who's going to be keeping dart frogs is probably going to have to miss those dart frogs in some way. So at the very least you should be giving some consideration to what type of water you're using to do that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what RO water is, why I use it for my dart frogs, and why you should probably think about getting RO water for your dart frogs as well. But I do have to change the filters on this thing, so I'm going to show you how I do that, talk a bit about this machine, and a bit about some of the other water options you can use with dart frogs. Okay, so first I just want to talk about what RO water is and why I use it. If you want to skip ahead to see my RO unit and how I change the filters in my unit, just go to this time code right here. So reverse osmosis is a method of water purification. It basically involves forcing water across a very fine membrane, something with very, very tiny pore size. To give you kind of an idea, my filter has two stages of mechanical filtration. The first one's a 5 micron filter, and the second one has a carbon block filter but also has a 1 micron sediment filter portion to it. But if you look at the RO membrane, I think it's a 0.0001 micron pore size, so very, very tiny, almost considered a non-porous material. That's how fine the pores are. But yeah, the idea is basically by forcing water across this very fine membrane, it basically excludes everything or most things other than the actual water molecule itself. So you do end up with some very pure water after it's been through an RO system. My system, as you'll see, is a 4-stage filter. As I mentioned, the first stage is a 5 micron sediment filter. Second stage is a carbon block filter that also has a 1 micron sediment filter to it, and then it goes into the reverse osmosis membrane. My unit actually has a 4-stage, which is a deionization resin cartridge, and the only reason I have that is because I originally got my unit for when I had a saltwater aquarium. So I would use all 4 stages for that, but for just the dart frogs I usually skip the deionization stage and just run the first 3 stages. So the last stage is the RO water, and especially with a new RO membrane, that's still going to get me down below 10 parts per million TDS, or total dissolved solids, which is pretty solid because I'm on a well and my water comes out of the tap at about 750 parts per million, so a lot of stuff getting left behind there. And the main reason I like to run the pre-filters, you don't technically need them with an RO system because the RO filter would handle all of that stuff as well. The pre-filters are just going to make the actual RO membrane last longer by removing some of that bigger stuff that's easier to filter out. It's not going to get clogged up in your RO membrane. And the RO membranes are usually quite a bit more expensive than just your regular sediment or carbon filters. So I actually usually change the sediment and carbon filters every 3 months, and then change the RO membrane every 6 months. And in terms of why I use RO water, the biggest reason is probably because I use it in my misters, and it's to avoid hard water spots or mineral deposits. As I mentioned earlier, I have crazy high mineral content water. It's 750 parts per million TDS coming out of my tap. So if I tried to use that through my mister systems, I would constantly have a lot of mineral buildup on my glass, be covered in water spots. And with these Mist King mist nozzles, they use such a fine opening that if I had hard water going through those, I feel like the Mist King nozzles would be getting clogged up all the time as well. So using that RO water just really helps me avoid a lot of that headache that would come with having hard water and having mineral deposits on my glass and my mister nozzles. And the other reason I use it in my misters is just it makes me feel a little bit safer using it with the frogs. As I've mentioned in other videos, dart frogs have very sensitive skin. Same with most frogs, they will absorb things through their skin, so if there's anything in your water, the frogs are going to be absorbing that as well. And I don't think being on a well like I am, there's too much in my water that's actually going to harm the frogs. It does worry me a bit how high the pH is, because my pH does come out of the tap at above 9. I'm not exactly sure. I know what maxes out my test kit at 9. And then with the tadpoles as well, I've tried experimenting using my tap water with the tadpoles, and they really don't seem to like it. I know I've tried it with my fish and my aquariums when I started getting back to that, and the fish really do not like my tap water either. And I haven't done too much experimenting with other types of water, but I'm kind of going off of what some other more experienced people have done, and it seems to be the consensus is that tadpoles, or dart frog tadpoles at least, do best in very soft water. With the addition of like leaf litter to add some tannins and stuff like that, really seems to be the consensus on the best way to raise dart frog tadpoles anyway. That might not apply to all frogs, but and I think a big reason for that is that a lot of dart frogs in the wild would be raised in like rainwater puddles. And I know RO water and rainwater are not the same thing, but they do have a lot in common in that they're just going to be very low TDS, fairly soft water usually. The other thing to consider, I don't have to worry about it because I'm on a well as I mentioned, but if you're on a city or a municipal water supply, there's a good chance you're going to have other chemicals added to your water like chlorine, chloramines, fluoride, stuff like that. I'm not sure exactly how harmful those are to the dart frogs. I would prefer to be better safe than sorry. I know the chlorines and chloramines can be harmful to fish, so I'd assume they're not really great for frogs either. Now I've heard you can use like aquarium products that will treat the chlorine and chloramines, something like Sechem Prime or something like that. I've heard of people treating their tap water with that stuff before giving it to their dart frogs. Can't really comment on that too much. I've never really had to do it myself. So if you do want to try and use tap water and treat it with something, I would recommend maybe doing some research on some forums or something like that. See if you can find any more information on using that, because I'm not the best source for that, as I've never actually had to do it myself. But if you are going to be heaping dart frogs, I would recommend at least looking into getting an RO system. I think with dart frogs you can skip the deionization stage if you just get a 3-stage with a sediment, carbon, and RO filter. I think that's absolutely fine for dart frogs. So I think you can get a reasonably priced RO unit for like in the $100 to $150 range. So if you're gonna have a dart frog collection, it's definitely a good investment, I think. But if you've got like one tank, you're just filling up like a hand mister or something like that, you probably don't need to actually go get an RO unit. What I would recommend is going to get one of those like 5-gallon jugs, and just finding a place near you that you can fill up with RO water, and just do that way instead of having to buy your own system. And then you don't have to worry about replacing filters or anything like that either. And if you can't find RO water, you can also use distilled water. It's also going to be very similar. So yeah, I would say RO water or distilled water. I think deionized water is a little more extreme than you need. It might not be the healthiest option. I would avoid spring water just because that's still going to have quite a bit of mineral content. It's probably safe for the frogs, but you are still going to have to deal with hard water spots, mineral buildup with spring water. But yeah, I think that pretty much does it for what I wanted to say about what RO water is and why I use it. So now we'll head over into the utility room, and I'm going to talk a bit about my particular RO unit and how I changed the filters for it. Okay guys, first of all I just want to go over the basic function of this RO unit. This is a Vertex Aquaristix Puratech reverse osmosis deionization unit. This is a 4-stage. So you got the source water coming in here. It goes into the pre-filter. This is a 5-micron sediment filter. Then it goes into this carbon block filter, which also has a 1-micron sediment filter. Then it goes up into here, which is the RO membrane. And then it goes down into this deionization resin cartridge. I've actually got this bypassed right now because I don't use this for my misting or tadpoles. So with these valves here, if I want a DI, I could close this valve and open these 2 valves, and then it would use this cartridge. but right now I've just got a bypass, so it just comes out of the RO membrane and comes down here and goes straight to my output. This one also has a built-in TDS meter, which isn't really doing anything right now because it's plugged into the output of the DI cartridge, which doesn't really have any water flowing through it. So that's one of the other things I'm going to do today while I've got this thing shut down and pulled apart. I'm going to replumb some of this tubing here, so I can actually hook this monitor up to the output line and be able to get a real-time TDS reading like I used to be able to when the whole thing was running. So first step, come down, sorry about the lighting down here, but I'm just going to shut off the source water. This is where the line comes in from the main house water, so I'm just going to shut the source water off. Alright, so we're ready to change the filters on this unit. I'm not going to bother with the DI cartridge today just because it hasn't been used much since the last time it was changed, and I don't really use it much anyways. So today just going to do the pre-filter, the carbon filter, and the RO membrane up here. So the first step is turn off the source water just to make sure this isn't all going to come gushing out when I undo this. So I've already done that, and I've also laid a towel down on the floor here just because I usually spill a little bit of water undoing these, even with the source water off, just because this tube is full. So to take this off, got this filter wrench here. This came with the unit, and you can see it's just got these nubs here, and these cartridges have these ridges on the sides that these fit against. So you just slide it up from the bottom, and righty tighty, lefty loosey, just like anything else. Usually once you crack it, you can do the rest by hand. So as you can see, you usually will spill a little bit of water. So it's a good idea to have a towel down. Make sure there's no power bars or anything below where you're doing this. And I just realized that I forgot something else I should have, which is some sort of bucket to dump this into afterwards. So I'm gonna run and grab something for that. Alright, bucket acquired. I'm just gonna dump the water out of this guy, pull the filter out, and see it looking a little bit brown. This is the new one, this is the old one, so you can see it's definitely time for a change. So it doesn't matter which way these ones go, they're the same top and bottom. You can see, or I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a ring at the bottom of this thing, and you basically just want this to sit on that ring, or so the ring goes up inside of it. And then there's a similar ring in the top of here, so you just want to kind of keep that straight, and it should go in smoothly. Just kind of do those hand snug. I don't worry about using the filter to tighten these back up. They do have a gasket on them, so it's not really necessary. And that's all there is to it. So this one's going to be exactly the same process. So I'm just going to breeze through this one, and then we'll get right to the RO membrane because that one's a little bit different. So changing this RO filter is pretty simple as well, but it is a bit different. You can see here it is kind of directional. The ends are different, so when we pull this out we want to make sure to pay attention to which way it's installed in there. So I have unplugged this because there is a transformer back here, but I can pop this tube off of these clips here so I can move it out slightly and hopefully not get any water into any of this stuff. The other thing I have to do is disconnect this tube just so that I can actually spin this. It's just one of these quick connect things. Pull out this little blue tab, and then compress the collar and pull the hose out. Now this should just unscrew. Alright, that's apparently on there pretty tight. So I have to go find a wrench of some kind. Alright, so I found a pipe wrench, so we'll see if I can get her to crack. There we go. This gasket here, there was a pretty snug fit in there, so I did have to put some pliers on the end to get this out. So I always like to just quickly go over it, make sure all the gaskets and O-rings look like they're in place properly. Everything looks good, so just gonna slide this back in, make sure it's in there snug, and that's basically all there is to that. There was a little bit of sediment built up on the inside of this cap, so I just kind of cleaned that out, and there's an O-ring in here, so I pulled that out and cleaned it up a bit too. Just because this RO membrane is under a bit of pressure. These two filters just run off of the house pressure. From the carbon block, it goes into this diaphragm pump, which pressurizes it into the RO membrane. So you do want to make sure that the O-rings on this unit are looking good too before you put everything back together. Make sure, see there's still a little bit of dirt in the bottom here where the O-ring sits, so I'm just going to make sure I get all of that cleaned out. So that's looking good, so I'm going to go ahead and replace the O-ring. You can also lubricate these O-rings as well at this stage. So I'm just going to pop this cap back on here now. And then this just goes back in there. And put that retaining clip back in. And that'd basically do it. At this point I could just turn the source water back on and turn it on and it'd be good to go. Now the thing with RO filters is you do want to run them for a few hours before you actually start using the water that they produce. So I do like to flush it for about 4 to 6 hours initially. But I'm not quite done here today because, as I mentioned earlier, I want to relocate this TDS meter, and I want to replumb some of this stuff to make it a little bit easier. Alright, I think we are now done. The source water coming in back here goes through the pre-filter, carbon filter, then into this pump, through the RO membrane here, and then that RO output comes to this hose where it splits off here. And so normally where I've got it set with this valve open, it goes directly over to here and then out this line, which goes to my water jugs. And see, I've now got the TDS meter probe on this T, and I just put a plug into this spot where it was. So that's bypassing the DI filter. If I want to use the DI filter, I close this valve and open this valve, which forces the water to go down into the DI filter, and then open this valve as well, which is on the output of the DI filter. Just got this normally closed here, just so water can't backfeed into the DI filter. So open these two, close this one for DI water, keep those two closed, and keep this one open for RO only. And now, whichever one I've got it set to, I will get a TDS reading off of this probe here. It'll show up on this screen. So I think we are ready for the moment of truth of turning it back on and make sure we don't have any leaks. Alright, the battery's flashing that it's about to die, so I'm going to try and get this done quickly here. So that's with the source water on. See this starting to fill up. So I'm going to plug it in and see what happens. Alright, so now it's really started to kick in. I think we got the air out now. So this thing just flashes if it's anything above 50 parts per million. So yeah, I expect that to just be all the stuff being flushed out of the filters initially. So that should drop down as I continue to run this. Alright, I just wanted to show you how I normally run this thing. I normally run it plugged into this outlet, which is hooked up to this timer. So I know the 5-gallon jugs that I've got usually take about 45 minutes to fill. So I can turn this timer on to 45 minutes and then walk away and not worry about it, and it'll fill up the jugs and I can come get them whenever I'm ready. Alright, so you can see it's already down to 17 parts per million. It was just at 18, so this has been running for less than 5 minutes now. You You can still kind of hear it working some of the air out of the system. But this parts per million is starting to go down. So yeah, it just really goes to show that you do want to make sure you flush your RO membrane out before you start using any of the water from it. Alright guys, that's going to do it for today. Thanks so much for watching. I know this isn't the most exciting topic in the world, but something I wanted to talk about eventually, so I figured I might as well get it out of the way while I had to change those filters anyway. But I got a video about the gecko coming out next, and then a couple more frog videos in the works. So stay tuned for that. And if you guys have any questions, comments, suggestions, leave them down below in the comments there. And until next time, happy frogging.